Welcome to the Art Studio Insights podcast, where we demystify the creative process and exchange ideas with career-minded artists. We are your hosts, Adriana M.A. and
Jackie Sanders. We are two emerging artists sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our journey. So if you are not already, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you will be notified when we launch a new episode every Tuesday. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about more of the art making process side of things, a little different than the business side, and really talking about the value of art critiques as a creative.
Yeah, and that's actually how Jackie and I met on that fateful night.
It was a morning. It was like 9 a.m.
That's true.
So, that fateful morning.
Fateful night sounds more dramatic, but yes, it was a fateful morning.
It was a bit dramatic though, because it was freezing cold.
I know, and after the meeting was over, we're like outside freezing our fingers off, talking for like 3 extra hours. But it was good. We were definitely on the same wavelength. So
we really got the creative juices flowing. And we were just like, we can't stop. We can't turn our brain off.
I know,
keep going.
Do you know about this opportunity? Do you know about this thing? Have you met this artist? Have you been to this place? How about this studio space? I mean, it was just
what about this book? What about this podcast? Blah, blah.
Yeah, it was firing on all cylinders. So it was really good. And it's actually really cool. We're technically celebrating our friendversary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friendiversary.
Yeah. It's around
2019?
Yes, it's 2 years.
It's only been 2 years.
I know. It feels like I've known you like 10 years.
Man. Yeah, you're stuck with me at this point.
Yeah.
So
we'll see about that. I'm just kidding.
Wow. Okay, so this is our last episode, guys. It's been fun. We hit 30. Now we're 31. No.
Just kidding. Yeah, we definitely have some of the playful banter, and this episode's going to have a little bit more of that. So it can't always be the structured stuff. Although we do have a rough guideline for this one, so we're just going to roll with it. But yeah, there might be some little extra jokes out there. But yes, so as part of today's topic, there are a few things we want to talk about. So Jackie, do you want to take it away? How about you tell us how you found the group, and then I'll say how I found the group, and go.
Okay. So about 2 years ago, well, I guess over 2 years ago, I was looking up ways to try to get back into making art on a regular basis. As I've shared on the podcast before, I was really recovering from a crazy burnout. And so I was like, okay, I just need something to get the juices flowing again. So I just searched online, and I said like art groups, Raleigh, North Carolina, and searched through a couple different like meetup groups, and this one with a local gallery called VAE popped up. And so I said, you know what, like, what's the worst that can happen? I'll show up. It'll be like an awkward 1 hour, and then I'll leave and never see these people again. Needless to say, like, I'm still great friends, and we still meet up with the artists a lot, doing monthly critiques. And so that's how I found the art critique group. And so if you guys have not done a critique group before, as a way just to level the playing field. So this is a situation where you would essentially bring either a work in progress or a finished piece to a group of other artists. Maybe they work in the same discipline as you, maybe a different discipline, and really just get feedback. There might be one problem that you're having with the piece, something that you don't know how to resolve. Maybe you just want general feedback in terms of your growth as an artist, any feedback they can give you. And this is a super, super common practice in the academic world, everywhere from honestly, even middle school and high school art classes. We would do like end of the project, like feedback from the class. And especially once you get to the college level, doing end of the project critiques with the group and really having that constructive criticism early on in the process can be super, super helpful just to get other people's eyes on it. So seeing that they had a group like that in Raleigh, I thought was so, so cool. So I'm like, oh, I didn't realize this like existed outside of a classroom, but it makes so much sense. Just like getting to know other artists. How about you? How'd you find it? Because you did not come from the strict academia background, from the art perspective.
And I went to a college prep high school, and they didn't have that kind of thing with art classes either. There was no crit element. I mean, we did fun stuff. We learned about different artists, but there was no crit. And even the classes I took in college, art ones, because I was not doing that as my degree, the classes that I took, none of them had that crit element either. Now, some of my friends and colleagues that were in fact taking art as their major did have crit, but I didn't. I never went through that. So
Yeah.
what I was doing was, when I was researching kind of like art as a career option as opposed to just as a side hobby situation, I started looking for places to show my work and a local artist group that perhaps I could ask questions about how they run their art business.
Yeah.
Not so much how they do the art. I wanted to know more about the business side. And that's when, in searching our local area, I found VAE, Visual Arts Exchange, which is the one we're talking about, and saw that they had different groups, different meetup groups, and one of them was for artists. So it did take months. See, I didn't have the same experience that Jackie did in knowing what they were about, the
Yeah.
crits. So for me, they did sound kind of intimidating at first.
Yeah.
So even after I found out what they were about, it kind of took me a few months to build up the courage to just,
Right.
show up with a piece of work. And
Especially
then,
if you're going by yourself, like that can be
Yeah.
super intimidating.
yeah, and I think the first time I went, I don't think I took any art. I think I just showed up by
Yeah.
myself, and I got there like 30 minutes early, which was over. There was a typo on the website at the time, so it was all awkward waiting around.
Oh,
I'm
man.
like, what am I doing here in this place on a Saturday morning and an abandoned street with nobody around?
Yeah,
and
because it's
it was
like
way
8
too
a.m. on a
early.
Saturday.
Yeah,
and
there's,
you're
like,
no one's
nobody.
alive right now.
Yeah, everybody's sleeping, and here I am like waiting to get into this crit that I didn't even know if it was going to happen.
Right.
So that's how I found the group. And then the reason I started going after that first experience, it was actually positive. Everybody was actually really nice. In fact, Jackie and I just recently had a joint exhibition
Yeah.
with one of the organizers of the group, or one of the
Oh,
hosts
that
of the
was so
group. Yeah,
awesome.
Sterling Bowen. He's a super awesome guy. You should check him out.
Yeah.
And part of the reason was like having someone, like him and the other artists that were there, like Jackie and others that we're still friends with, that we met and made friends with,
Mhm.
was, once we went the first time, saw how I was like relatively relaxed. Nobody was there to, point at your art and giggle and make fun of you.
Like,
Not
wow,
at
you're
all.
terrible. Oh my goodness. Why
Yeah.
are you even here? Why'd you show up? Like all those like negative self-talk things that you build up in your head.
But
And you're
it's-
like, no one actually says that. If they
Yeah.
do,
Well, and I was apprehensive. It's true, because I'm like, what if it's like all these like hoity-toity art people, academia people? No offense, Jackie, but what if
Oh, I
it's
get
like
what you
these
mean.
like, just like, I am Professor blah blah blah,
right.
and what are you doing here, newbie? Kind of thing. Like, I didn't know what to expect, so that's part of my apprehension. But I still wanted to connect with other artists, so that's kind of why I went. And
Yeah.
then once I started going and saw the support, it was nice. I came from business school, not art school, so I was curious but also apprehensive as to what critique would be like. And then seeing it was actually helpful and people were exchanging ideas, well, I just kept going.
Yeah, and I kind of went into it that same way. I mean, I knew what an art critique in college was like, and so I at least knew like that term. So like, okay, but I didn't bring artwork either the first time I went. Mainly just, I think, from a self-conscious standpoint. I also realistically hadn't been making a ton, and that's why I really wanted to start going. Was okay, like at least if I can surround myself with similar-minded creatives to help almost like feed off their energy, because every time I would go to a gallery event, go to a First Friday, that's like I would leave and go home and just like full of creative energy. So my goal was really like, how can I harness this more? How can I bring this into my life more? So it's like a once a week or every other week event that's like a rocket fuel of inspiration, essentially. It's like get you back in that mind, because it's so different from academia, where like that is your life, your friends are all creative. It's like these are normal conversations. So then when you go to the more corporate world and like you're not forced to be creative on a daily basis, I almost was starting to wonder, like, did I lose it? Like, can I even think like that again? Like, is my best work behind me? Like, I haven't made a solid piece or intentional piece of work in
a while.
years, like literally years, like the worst burnout. And so I was like, nope, I've done it. Like, I peaked at 20. Like, this is it. And so it was really nice going to the group. Yeah, everyone was so supportive, having a whole range of different mediums of artists, different levels of artists in one spot was super, super encouraging. And honestly, I think that's the reason we kept going back and still do.
Yeah, and it's also like, especially if you're not in a public spacing studio and you're working from home, which I think at the time I was. Yeah, I was working from home at the time. I didn't have a studio, neither did you. You worked from home too.
Yeah, I was working from my apartment.
Yeah, then it became a place to, not just, talk to other artists and, meet other artists, but also like learning how to talk about your art, getting feedback on how to possibly improve something, especially if you felt stuck, get ideas on new directions of, where your work could go. Like it just became like this kind of think tank situation, right? Like it was just an exchange, like Jackie said, it kind of energizes you and almost in a way it challenges you that when you go back, you want to have something new to show, right?
Right.
And I don't know, it was great.
Yeah. Great. And that's the kind of, I think, especially coming from that like school setting for me, I found that having those critiques, whether they were like once a month or every other week, all different groups are different. And they happen in cities like all over the country. I mean, all over the world, I'm sure. Or you can just get a few friends and do it if you know that they're creatives. But it's really helpful having that accountability of like shorter term deadlines. Because you can say, okay, I'm going to have something by the end of the month, all you want. But if you know, okay, on that Saturday, I'm going to a group, they're going to see if I've made progress or not. It's a little more motivating. And so especially coming from the background of having school assignments where it's like, okay, well, what does making artwork look like when there's no assignment, there's no deadlines, there's no actual repercussions if this doesn't get done? And so it's nice having a group and community that you can be accountable to, which that was honestly the big thing for me, is like the benefits of that in-person critique group was really having that new environment to put my artwork in. Like you said, like I was working out of my second bedroom. I basically turned it into my art studio, like took over the whole space. If anyone follows me on Instagram and scrolls back to then, it was like a bit ridiculous, but a million holes in those walls. But really getting the artwork outside of that, like lighting, outside that atmosphere, and even just bringing it into a gallery space, you have such a different interaction with it. And having that community of like people to give you feedback on it just makes you interpret the work and have a new relationship with the piece, which is super, super awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's that community aspects too. There's some things and challenges that we feel like usually only other artists will understand.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And friends and family, they do mean well, but they don't necessarily have the same vocabulary. So, it might be a question of contrast or composition, and they'll say something like, "Oh, I really like it, but I don't know why." And you're like, "But why?"
Right. Like I need that feedback.
Yeah. Or then you have the flip side of that. Someone would say, "Well, if you had a bird in a tree, I can understand it better." And it's like, "Oh no, but it's an abstract."
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it is what it is, right? And then on the flip side of that, you'll have like, folks, even if they're not from the art world, could still point out things that perhaps you didn't notice and could help improve your work. Maybe there's something that's taking the viewer's attention away from the work that you didn't intend to, but usually if it's amongst other artists, they'll be able to point it out a little bit more objectively and maybe like help you with how to troubleshoot, right?
Right. And I think that especially when you like boil it down to like those principles of design, like you might think that it's a color issue, but realistically it's a contrast issue. Like it doesn't matter what the palette is, it's the contrast that's needs help refining, which unless you have that vocabulary, which can be taught in an academic school background or through online seminars or within peers, books, podcasts, like really having that foundation of knowledge that can be learned anywhere once you're amongst artists can be super helpful, because then you can actually identify the problem with your piece if you're having trouble with it and address it. So it saves a lot of time too. It's almost like having like a group of experienced professors around you, which some of the people in our critique group are professors, which is very helpful.
Yeah, No, that's true. Some of them do teach college level or high school level, so that's really cool.
Yeah.
But again, without that pressure of, they're not grading you, so it doesn't
Right.
matter. It makes it way more relaxed. Also, like being in that community setting, you also have, a place where you can share resources. Maybe you have opportunities, upcoming calls and exhibitions, especially for, in your case, getting back into the art world and in a
Yeah.
different state from where you studied, or in my case, coming from a completely different business.
Yeah.
It became I don't know all the places to show. I don't know all the places to look for calls. Like
Mhm.
it became a great place to exchange information, and perhaps I know something about technology or business that I can exchange. It's not a go there to take from everybody. It's a go there and see what you can bring to the table and see what you can get out of it. And
Yeah.
also, like, it's fun to nerd out like at these places, at these meetups. You can talk about supplies, you can talk about techniques, you can talk about how to improve the art making process itself.
Right.
Maybe like make things a little bit easier on yourself. You're like, this brush is just not working, and somebody might go, well, that's a watercolor brush and you're working in oils.
Oh no, yeah.
Whoops.
No.
Like they can help you with some of that knowledge gap, again, without judgment, without anybody like getting on a pedestal. Like you're on the same playing field.
Right.
It's just so helpful.
Exactly. And I feel like it's like similar with most industries, but especially with the arts, of like you really can build that connection, that peer-to-peer relationship with other artists. So whether they are just starting out or they're more established or they're regionally known, because we've all been at the starting stage, we understand that level of growth. It's just like with any other corporate business. If someone's brand new and like an entry level position or an intern, the person right above them kind of remembers how it was like and the things that they would find helpful, which is really cool. Now then, going to these groups consistently, you can build relationships with other artists and even make some business partnerships, whether it's collaborating on exhibitions or launching a podcast together because you talk all the time. It's really cool, like, be able to build that and see just who you connect with, because you also learn, like you were saying earlier, Adriana, like you can talk about your work more effectively and efficiently. You can share your message and your purpose more. And having those people as a sounding board who really get to know you through your work, which is such an amazing way to build a friendship, because the art making process can be so vulnerable and can be so incredible to connect with other people on. So building a friendship and relationships based off that is super, super rewarding. Plus, you're constantly just like exchanging ideas with these people. Like,
Yep.
As we talked about with the first day we met, it was like an instant click, and it doesn't always happen that with friendships, but it's just constant sharing because you just get each other. It's just like with any other friendship where you build it based on a niche, whether video games or sports. It's like you can just talk the same language, and really just generate ideas and solutions and help people figure out, okay, where can their work go next? And seeing where it goes after that is super, super fun.
Yeah. Plus, it's just kind of great to be able to be in a group with like-minded individuals that get you, or try to get you,
Right.
if you will. And again, it just takes some of that pressure off. And I mean, art, as most of us know, can be kind of solitary in terms of the creation itself. And this kind of lets you walk away from that for a little bit. And a lot of these groups, it's just 1 or 2 hours, away from your studio. It's not like an all-day commitment either. And yeah, it just gets you out a little bit, and stretch your wings a little bit.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so we do want to dive in on this episode and talk about, as a community and with your artwork, maybe where you are and assessing, is it a good time to go to a critique group? But first, why don't you tell us about our sponsorship for today's episode?
Yeah, so really exciting. Today's episode is sponsored by told you today was gonna be kind of dramatic. Today's episode is brought to you by the Level Up Artist Community, aka the one that we host.
Our community.
Yep. This monthly membership will transform your art business and help you level up through access to a community of goal-driven creatives, advice from industry professionals, and course modules that cover everything from social media to technology to sustainable studio practices. So it's a lot of fun. This membership, we are focused on 5 main pillars, if you will. So we have find your focus and take inspired action. Yep. Balance your creative and business practices while keeping your sanity. You know, it's hard to juggle all the things. Show up in a way that feels right for you. So authenticity, yes, please. Save yourself time on your creative energy and join a community that shares it forward. So, yep, this is what we're all about. Enrollment opens a couple times a year. So head over to levelupartist.com to learn more. Sign up to be alerted when enrollment reopens, or it might be open by the time you're listening to this. And there will also be links to a masterclass, but more on that later. So Jackie, why don't you take it back on?
So going back to the value of artist critique in the spirit of community, there's definitely so many benefits from the art making process itself as to why you would want to go to a critique. We've kind of touched on them, but I think especially if you are an artist, whether you are working and feel maybe isolated from other people, maybe you have a home studio or you just don't interact with a lot of other artists in person or online, because online is a great way to get feedback as well. But really, if you're looking for a fresh perspective on your work, and some people have different opinions on whether they like sharing works in progress or they just want feedback on finished pieces, but either way, getting a fresh perspective can be so beneficial because you're just very in the process. You can't remove yourself. Even when you try to be objective, you can't as much as you want to be. So getting those fresh eyes is so helpful. Plus, they might see elements, your fellow peers in the critique group, that are really popping out that you're so used to looking at that they don't pop out for you anymore. And that you can really see that objectively of, okay, oh, I'm seeing this in the new light. You're totally right. This is exactly why it wasn't settling for me. So getting that fresh perspective is super helpful.
Yeah, and it can be interesting. They might say like, oh, I see a turtle right over there. And you're like, well, I wasn't trying to paint a turtle in this. Okay, this is really cool.
Yeah.
So it can definitely be fun, you know, not just to like, it's practical, but it can be fun too, is what I mean to say that. And, you know, by taking, again, your artwork out of the usual setting, putting it somewhere else, fresh eyes, like Jackie was saying, sometimes you can get feedback on how to improve work. Maybe there's something going on with the elements of design, or maybe it's the composition itself. And it kind of helps like to have someone else like help you point that out.
Yeah.
Also important, like depending on your subject or intended message, sometimes it's kind of challenging where you're like, well, the artwork speaks for itself. Well, not really.
Lies. Lies.
So it's useful to be among your peers, to be able to discuss, you know, the way and maybe even practice the way you talk about your piece, maybe even refine the way that you're describing it. This could even lead to changes in the piece itself. But sometimes you're just like, oh, the piece speaks for itself. And if somebody were to walk up to you and say, what's this painting all about, or whatever your creative output is, you might just kind of get tongue twisted and be like, well, it's a thing, and you want it, right? And so we find it really helpful, you know, in terms of the feedback, not just of the piece itself, but also to be able to talk about the piece itself. If you're in an in-person, you know, group situation.
And I do think it's especially helpful if you are an emerging artist, really trying to still find your style and fine tune your artist statement, your message, those core stories that relate to your work, because it's nice having almost those fresh eyes of people and fresh friendships, because they don't know your whole backstory. They don't know what components of yourself you're bringing to your work. And so by sharing what is important for them to interpret the work with, it can also help you write those artist statements. Like, why is it important that you were the one that made this piece, and all those stories that come with it? But as much as the good feedback from other people can be helpful, like you were saying, of like, okay, the composition maybe change or contrast or any type of feedback in terms of someone else's interpretation of your work is, I do want to release a disclaimer in terms of it's always good to listen to everyone's critique and feedback, but you don't always have to follow what they think you should do. So if they're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you did this, 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 and this? And you're like, I mean, I could do that.
Doesn't mean I'm going to.
But that doesn't mean I'm going to. That doesn't mean you have to. And also, like, people understand that people come with their own bias as well. So artists included, even if they try to stay objective and just use their artist vocabulary, of course, their style is going to be influenced on how they interpret other people's artwork. You can always get some nice, super raw perspectives and feedback if you have visitors to your space or non-art people, I put that in quotes, who try to give you feedback or just interpret your work. But remember that you don't have to do what other people say, because when it comes down to it, it is your work. So especially coming from art school, doing critiques so often, I mean, every class we'd have about 3 or 4 a semester. So if you're taking about 4 classes a semester,
That's a lot of critiques.
that's like 30 something critiques every year times, you get the picture. So you kind of learn how to really let the critique come in, sit with it, do what feels right, and then let everything else go. Because after all, it is your artwork, so you can decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah, and unlike art school, like you mentioned, it's not necessarily an assignment. They're not giving you critique
Right.
and asking you to change it. It's your business.
Mhm.
It's your self-expression that you're going through. So it's honestly up to you. I mean, on my end, I came from a business background, so I was worried that my art may not be to some standards that I assume were taught at art school, which is not true. There's no universal good versus bad art. This is
Right.
exactly the 5 bullet points you scored on. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So I, on my end, figured critique may be the place to learn, except I ended up realizing it's just a place to get feedback. It's just an accumulation of various opinions, various voices, and you have to take them with a grain of salt.
Right.
That's what it boils down to. I do have another disclaimer I just thought of too. If you're a person that you feel like approval is really important for you, and
Ooh,
someone saying
yeah.
something negative can crush you, or saying something positive will get you on like cloud
Right.
9 kind of thing, just keep that in mind when you go to critique. You're going to hear the spectrum, so it may help you build a tough skin. And
Yeah.
a lot of people, again, our experiences is like 99.9% of everybody is super nice. You will get that one person every once in a while that you're just like soul crushed,
Yeah.
you know? So, again, grain of salt, we can't stress that enough. Go in it, get out of it whatever you want. Also, bring to the table what you can,
Right.
to help others. Maybe you notice something they don't. So it's great. It's a give and take.
Exactly.
Just don't take too much, positive or negative. Don't take too much. Just take
Yeah.
what you need.
And I
Yeah.
think that's a good point of like not letting other people's opinions and that's just like a general life lesson of like, don't let the compliments get to you. Don't let the negative feedback get to you. Like if you stay just level about everything, and yeah, take it with a grain of salt. But then also, if you do find that you're getting the same feedback super, super consistently,
Then
maybe then you want to considering it more. Or if there's a certain part of your style that maybe you are getting feedback on, maybe criticism, I think through time and consistent execution, maybe your vision will become more clear. So if you make one piece and you get criticism on it, what happens if you were to make 25 pieces of that similar style? Then it might become more clear to the outside viewer what that vision is, what the cohesive element is. Because that could be a core part of who you are as an artist, and other people just can't see it yet. So in summary, make more work, take everything with a grain of salt, and artist critiques can be a great way to build community. So if you find that you want to start building a local community, whether in person or virtual, because you can do most things virtual these days, we would definitely encourage you to look for local groups and just put yourself out there. Even if you can't find any, you can get a group together and challenge them to give you guys feedback. It might be on Instagram, it might be a Zoom group. But really see what happens when you look online and look for other creatives that are probably seeking the same type of community that you are.
Yeah, and definitely don't take critique personally.
Yeah.
Artwork can be vulnerable. It can be like your most personal expression, and here we are sharing it in front of other humans.
Yes.
Just remember, it is not a critique of you, even if it feels that way. That's not what it is, right? Should be objective, should be about the art, but everybody is taking their lens on it. So remember, it's not about you. but with that, we do want to make an announcement as we wrap this up to say that we are really, really excited. We kind of briefly mentioned it earlier, but we want to go ahead and kind of go into a little bit more now that we are reopening the Level Up membership at the end of this month, November. Depending on when you're listening, of course.
November 2021.
Yes, we are. So in the meantime, if you're listening to this before we're open, we are hosting a free 1-hour masterclass called The 10 Things You Need to Transform Your Art Passion into a Sustainable Business, which, as always, as well as notes on this episode and the link to this video. It will be linked in our episode notes as well as through each of our websites. So you can connect with us, and you can find me at Amay Art across all platforms. And you, Jackie?
I'm at J Sanders Studio on all platforms. We are so excited to welcome in our new Level Up Artist members, and we will give you more information on future episodes. But for this week, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for listening.